All right. Looks like we've got a handful of attendees already, and it's 10 o'clock sharp. So we're gonna get started. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today for the UTRGV SARA Summer Training Series, Remote Training Series. This is the third of 3 events that we've been holding over the last 3 weeks. This is the final of 3. Today we're going to be covering tomato production and watermelon production. In the previous couple of weeks, we covered asparagus production and drip irrigation production. The videos from those events will be on our UTRGV SARA YouTube page, so be sure to check those out. So today's webinar is brought to you by the Beginning Farmer and Rancher Project and the Rural Texas Prosperity Project. They are both programs under UTRGV Center for Sustainable Agriculture and Rural Advancement. My name is Colin Kane. I'm the director of the Texas Rural Cooperative Center, also at the university and also under SARA. And just to give you a little bit of sort of background on the way today is going to work, we are going to be covering 2 different subjects today. The first one is going to be tomato production here in South Texas. We're going to hear from Ivan Guerra, who is a program coordinator with our Rural Texas Prosperity Project, who has many years of commercial tomato production under his belt. We're gonna take about 20 minutes to do that. Then we're gonna have a short, say 5 to 7 minute Q&A period where everyone, if you have questions on this presentation, on this webinar, if you move your cursor around on the Zoom window, there should be a button at the bottom. It says Q&A. As Ivan is talking and presenting this, as your questions come up, make sure to enter them in there. So when after the 20 minutes is done, we have questions and we can get into them as quickly as possible. Time's going to be a little bit tighter for this event, and we're going to have to sort of manage that time a little bit more strictly. So we're going to do Ivan Tomatoes 20 minutes, Q&A for 5 minutes. Then we're going to transition to Albert Ibarra, who's going to talk about watermelon production in the Valley. He has a number of years of commercial watermelon production, and he's going to talk about that for about 10 to 15 minutes. And then we're going to transition to a longer Q&A period there at the end where we can talk about watermelon production. We can talk about tomato production and general questions about best practices there. And we're going to incorporate more of our staff for that broader Q&A section. We're going to incorporate Cruz Salinas and Juan Regosa, who are both with the Beginning Farmer and Rancher Project here at the university. So this is a bit of an experiment. These are the first 3 events we're doing. So we're also going to have a poll at the end of this event where we're going to try to solicit feedback from people about what their intentions to do with this information are, but also what type of events would you like to see from us. We feel like at least the Q&As have been very lively. And so we're thinking about doing more open-ended Q&A sessions, or other sort of single topic webinars. And we're really trying to figure out how people are finding out about us and what type of information they'd like to learn. So without further ado, again, so the Q&A bar at the end, remember to enter your questions in there. We'll be doing the poll at the end. I'm going to turn it over now to Ivan Guerra, who's a program coordinator with our Rural Texas Prosperity Project. He's been working with the university for over 9 years, and he has been a commercial farmer and rancher for over 20 years. He's been growing tomatoes commercially for over 6 years. So he has a lot of experience that is relevant to South Texas. It's a very different, producing climate down here. And so it's important to hear from local experts on this. He also has an ag science degree from University of Texas A&M at Kingsville. And we're very lucky to count him as one of our staff. So Ivan, I'm gonna hand it over to you and take it over, sir.
All right, thank you, Colin. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Today's presentation that I'm going to do is going to be on tomato production in South Texas. And I'm going to start off here with some interesting points that relate to the RGV. At one point in time, we had close to 36,000 acres of tomatoes planted here. And now in the last couple of years, we have about 800 that are planted yearly in this area. We have the right climate, we have the right soil, that rich alluvial soil. And we also have, the culture that enjoys the salsas, the fresh tomatoes, the cannon, the fried green tomatoes. So I just wanted to point that out real quick before I get started. There's some topics of discussion today that these are the ones that we're going to go over. If there's anything here that somebody uh, may have a question on something that's not here, at the end of the presentation, we'll have my email address, and you can email me, and I'll gladly get back with you with that information. If there's something here in our topics that you may have interest in and that's not going to be talked about today. Planting dates for the RGB. All this information is going to be kind of informal. It's through my experience and other farmers in this area. You go out and buy seeds, and you turn the packet around, and it gives you planting dates, and usually those dates may not relate to this region, but that's a question that I always get, and typically for starting your seeds indoors for the spring, uh, I typically start in early January. You always want to calculate at least uh, 30 days before you put those seedlings in the ground. So always try to remember that there's a 30-day window that you have to start your seedlings. And like I mentioned, you buy a pack of seed, and it's gonna say start plant your seedlings, from March 1st through April or May, whatever. And I usually, like I mentioned, start those seedlings in a little greenhouse early January, and I run them 4 to 6 weeks, and I try to get them planted in the ground by mid-February. But always remember that you want to make sure that you put them in the ground when the chance of frost has passed, which is really hard in the valley. The last couple of years, we haven't had a real cold winter, but don't be surprised. There are years that we've had that we still have a frost in early April. So the consider that when you're doing your seedlings. The fall planting, probably, I typically do start mid-July. In about a week or so, I'll start, and it's kind of tricky because you got to start your seedlings in a what I use a greenhouse, and I put shade cloth, so like a shade house, I guess you would call it. And because the sun is so harsh that if you put them, of course, in the greenhouse, they're gonna burn up. So you want to have some kind of shade to start off those seedlings. And typically, you want to calculate about 100 days before the first frost to give you 100 days to harvest your tomatoes, which here in the valley, it's normally December 15th is when we typically get the first frost. Start Starting your seedlings. This is the technique that I use. You know, like a lot of us that are doing it at a small scale, we don't have the resources, or we don't have a lot of money to invest. So I typically buy my seeds online. As you can see, I have the first picture is a little seed packet from Paramount Seeds, and I start off usually with 200 plants. So in these three pictures here, uh, I have probably about $40 invested. The seeds are 20. The potting mix is probably 10, and maybe I invested a couple of dollars in these trays. And I recycle them, and I may use them over and over. But if you're initially starting, you'll have maybe $40 invested at the most. And it's real simple. You put your potting mix in those cells of the trays about halfway, and then you drop the seed. You can see here on the picture in the middle, the seeds are green, and then I'll come back and cover it with that potting mix. And each plant, once I put the pencil to it, it's maybe 15 to 20 cents a plant. uh, Once I get those seedlings planted and whatnot, typically this is the way that I get them to grow in the greenhouse. And in this little structure, it provides some shelter for those cold days that we may have in January, because of course these are going to be for our spring planting. So I have maybe this little greenhouse probably will cost you $20, at the local hardware store. And then I've expanded to this one here on the far left. That may be like $80. So like I said, you don't need to have a lot of money. uh, and still produce quite a lot of seedlings for your garden. In comparison to buying them maybe from Walmart or Lowe's, I haven't bought them for a while, but I know they probably run you anywhere from $1 to $4 a plant, depending how big they are. So it can add up uh, pretty quick. And okay, the land preparation. We get that question a lot. Well, how do I, what's the best way to prepare the land? I have a little garden tractor. You can see here on the left screen, a little red garden tractor. And what I do, I typically run a plow, and that provides a better soil structure and also water holding capacity. The soil is able to absorb the water more efficiently. If you don't have, that option, we've done a lot of gardens in the past with a tiller as well, and the tiller will work fine. It'll still perform and get the soil soft and ready for you to plant. So it all depends what you have available. Tomato plant types. There's hundreds or thousands of different tomato varieties and whatnot. But there's two types. There's a determinate and an indeterminate. Determinate typically are the tomato plants that the whole fruits the tomato will ripe within a certain period of time. The indeterminate, if you plant them in the fall, they'll be giving you tomatoes all the way till the first frost. So it all depends, what variety you're planting, and we'll discuss that as we go. But that's the difference between if you see that on a seed packet, and that's all it is. Determinate is you're going to be your bushy tomato, and the indeterminate, is the one that you're going to have to really trellis because it's going to grow as tall as you let it. These are some varieties of beef steak tomato varieties that uh, used and I've been pretty successful at growing them. And like I said, I made notation here, they're determinate or indeterminate. And of course, that's a whole different presentation, I guess, on varieties and disease resistance and whatnot. But, just for the purpose of this presentation and what I've worked with, these are the varieties that I feel confident of planting and getting a pretty good yield of tomatoes. I have this little image here, and it shows you the indeterminate. It'll keep growing. You have to stake it, trellis it, and the determinate usually you can get by without trellis in it, but it's recommended that you still trellis it because the branches will start breaking. These are cherry and grape tomato varieties that I've also used. Just keep in mind that the grape is very labor intense. Once they start you know, producing, it adds up pretty quick, and it's a real labor intense to harvest. And those are the varieties that have, that I've used and I've been able to get a pretty good yield uh, out of. Water requirements. That's a question that we always get. How much water should I put, on my tomatoes? And it's gonna vary because not all the soil, from one end of the valley, the soil may be different to the other end of the valley. But when it comes to, let's start off with seedlings. If you do like I do, your trays and you want to start your own seedlings, it's very important that you water those at least twice a day, in the morning and in the evening, because the cells are really small and they don't hold a lot of moisture. So don't walk away and come back 3 days later because you're gonna have a hard time for them to germinate, or if they already germinate, they're gonna dry up. So that just keep in mind, twice a day if you're doing your seedlings and on trays. Now, if you're already have your tomatoes in ground and planted, the best advice that I can give you is have a timer. And I know a lot of people are still, using maybe flood or different methods other than drip to water their tomatoes. But if you have a sprinkler, put it on a timer, and because I've had a lot of people say, well, I turned it on, and by the time I knew it, I ate dinner and went to bed. In the morning, the whole back garden was flooded. So that's something that happens very often to individuals. So a timer is a good investment. You can control the amount of water. Of course, as your tomatoes are producing, too much water can also harm the plant. You start getting waterlogged tomatoes, they start cracking. So, just remember the rule of thumb is uh, 1 inch to an inch and a half per week. And like I said, that can vary. I got a real sandy loam soil at my place, so I got to put more water than somebody who has, a soil that's rich in clay. So that's going to vary. Irrigation methods. Just like I don't know if some of you all saw last week's presentation, but it's on our SARA website. It was pertained to drip irrigation, and one of my coworkers, Cruz Salinas, did a whole presentation on drip irrigation, which is very useful when you're doing any type of garden, and that's what we recommend, and to different growers that wanting to do a small scale or a larger scale production. Flood irrigation is a method that has been used here in the valley for many years in row crops and other types of agricultural practices. Although if you're doing a smaller scale garden, the last thing you want to do is flood this garden and put water all here in the middles where you're going to be walking and have all the weeds grow. That goes the same with a sprinkler. You put your sprinkler here and you start watering all this area here. You don't need the water here in the middles. You need it right here, right on the row where you have your plants. That's why the drip is very efficient. You get the water placement at the base of your tomato plants. Um, and if you want to add fertilizer, you can fertigate, and that was discussed on that video as well. So it's a very efficient way to place water, in your garden. Weed control. Probably the most popular method for weed control for small gardeners is the plastic mulch. It's readily available. It's not pricey, and it serves the purpose. Um, I use plastic mulch for my tomato growing. Uh, like I said, it's able to suppress the weeds. I'm able to start my planting a little earlier because this plastic, what it does, it heats up the soil. So if I go in early February, we're still have those cool days, but that the days sometimes go up into the 80s or 90s. So the soil heats up and it's able to help the plant. I'm also able to conserve moisture, and of course, like I mentioned, it suppresses the weeds. The hay, in my experience, and that can vary. Maybe where you're at, there's not as many ants, but I've used hay because I do a lot of hay baling, so I've have them available. But the experience has with me is that once I start adding the water and you know it seems to harbor a lot of ants and insects. So I've sort of gone away from that. The advantage is that hay you can turn into compost, and you can work it into the soil once you're done with your garden. The woven cloth, um, the advantage of that it's perforated, meaning that the water can go through it, but it's pricey. So it gets expensive really quick. And of course, herbicides. If you're doing conventional methods, you can zap those weeds with chemicals. Nutrient requirements. Uh, like I mentioned, we do help quite a bit of people, and that's one of the questions that we usually get. And what we recommend is for you to start off with a soil test, because that'll tell you exactly, what components your soil lacks, and they'll give you a breakdown of what nutrients you'll need to add and how much. And if you have a small area, you don't have acreage, they can possibly break it down per square foot and tell you, okay, add this, and you also have the option to declare, well, I'm going to be planting tomatoes in this area. What's the best uh, mixture of amendments that I can place on that soil. So that's what we recommend, is to start off with that. Of course, we know all plants need nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Uh, and also, we do quite a bit of we deal with a lot of organic growers or individuals wanting to use natural methods. And as you can see here on the picture, we were helping this individual that didn't want to use synthetic fertilizers. So we advised him to put compost. And he said, well, let's get a truck of compost and just spread it, and then we'll just incorporate it in the whole field or his whole little garden. And sometimes, if you're running on a budget, you may need 2 yards of compost instead of one for the whole area. And in our experience, there's really no need for you to side dress compost in these middle areas. So what we've been doing is just amending the rows here that I'm pointing at, and we'll usually add that compost. And our source is McAllen Compost Center. They're the ones that are doing the mixtures of compost and selling it to the public. So that's a good source, and it's very reasonable. So we go in there, we add the compost. We'll add about an inch, and we'll spread it out to the top of the row where the planting is going to be done, and then we'll run a little tiller to incorporate it, and that'll provide enough nutrients for that planting. And he can possibly get another, if this is the spring, he possibly can just clean it up and run a fall crop as well before re-amending it on the following year. So that's a technique that we've been using, and has been pretty successful with those individuals that we've assisted. Plant spacing, that can vary. This is a picture of my operation here. The rope placing that I have, uh, I have it at 60 inches. And the reason that I have it so spread apart is because I run a tractor in between. So this is gonna vary depending on your space that you have available. And this is just what they recommend: row spacing between 2.5 to 4 feet apart, meaning from here to here. If you're not gonna be running, like me, a four-wheeler tractor, there's no need to spread out so far. You can consolidate it and make it just 4 feet or 2 feet. Just keep in mind that you want to have enough room to walk through there and be able to harvest your tomatoes without breaking the branches and causing harm to your plants. The plant spacing, which is from here to here, uh, you know, I got real comfortable with doing 2 feet, but I have a lot of area. Some people want to do a high density. They'll go a foot. We've heard people that plant, they're doing a raised bed, and they don't have a lot of space. So they're doing, 12 inches, but it's recommended between 18 to 24 inches for your plant spacing. Growing methods. These are just some growing methods that producers are doing here in the area. And one of them that probably most people are aware of, that has been gaining a lot of momentum, is the tunnel house production. And that's because you can sort of add production, extend your growing season. So that has become very popular. Raised beds, of course, as if you're in an urban setting, you have your raised beds, and you can also do your drip and get them all to where everything is on a timer. Uh, One other method that is also very popular in urban setting is container planting. I don't think I put it on here, but I had a question last week about container planting. And yeah, you want to try to get a 5 gallon container, the minimum of 5 gallon if you're doing, tomato production in containers. Types of trellis systems. Um, these are several different types of trellis systems. This first picture here is the one that I use. I just use a stake and some garden tape because it's the most economical for me. And other people use the bamboo sticks, which I use this little stick that I get at I believe Lowe's or Home Depot sells them. But you can also go to horticulture stores and get those bamboo stakes. Um, you know, there's other ways that are more lucrative, like these cattle panels. If it's more like a permanent setting, you can invest in these panels and create your own, trellis system that is sort of semi-permanent. Of course, if you're like me, I have a bunch of, baling twine thrown all over the place. So I utilize that. Also, sometimes I'll run some T-posts and run that baling twine to trellis and sometimes I'll do a Florida weave, which is just zigzagging the plants. And there's a plastic netting also that you can get online that will serve the purpose as well. The types of trellises, like I mentioned here, here's the fancy cattle panel. This is my operation. You can see I've got everything on stakes with that tape. But keep in mind that, it is labor intense. I gotta probably trellis every other day as the plant's growing. Um, Here, one of my coworkers does the tunnel production with tomatoes, and he's got PVC stakes here with baling twine, sort of the Florida weave in his operation. So it all depends your budget, what you feel comfortable with. Some people have, stuff laying around the house, metal rebar or all that can also be utilized. Pests. These are pests that you're gonna deal with, and I'm not gonna go through all of them, but the ones that have done the most damage to me are the whitefly. As far as the pests and the diseases, uh, you got to be careful with the tomato yellow leaf curl virus. Uh, Remember that when you're buying the seeds, I recommend, to look and see if they have. You'll see this little phrase here, and it'll say resistant. So that's my advice of getting those tomato seeds or varieties that have some resistance. And I've, like I said, I've experimented with several varieties, and some of them have, this that they're resistant toward the curl, the yellow curl virus, but you know we have so much pressure of the whitefly that they eventually get infected. And the way it works is they get infected with this virus, your tomato plants sort of get stunted, and it's hard for them to produce. They're not going to produce the high yields. Tomatoes may be, you know, not as desired or as luscious as a healthy plant would produce. So just keep in mind that you wanna have a variety that is resistant to this, and it all comes from the white fly. It's a vector, and it spreads it from plant to plant. These are some controls of organic methods. Is And these are just different insecticides and fungicides. They all serve the purpose. If you're doing organic methods, if you're doing conventional methods, it all depends what you're doing. I believe the one that I didn't put it on here, but what I've used a lot, and it would be on this one here, neem oil. Neem oil is really good, and of course the insect soap. But you got to do, you know, a schedule. Every 2 to 3 days, coat it with insecticide soap or neem oil, and it provides the leaf to get slippery, and it provides the insect cannot grab onto that leaf. So we typically what I would do, I got away from growing conventionally and tried organic. Try to keep everything that I produce, using the organic methods. And there's a lot of stuff once you get on the internet. There's a lot of products, but just like everyone that's starting off or has a small operation like me, I don't have a deep pocket, so I try to stay within what I have available, and neem oil and insecticide soap seems to help with the pressure. And of course, keep in mind that the tomato production in the fall is going to have a lot more issues with pests than in the spring. At least here in the valley, I've experienced that there's more pressure in the fall than in the spring. The harvesting, you know, I sold quite a bit to local individuals, and they want a vine ripe tomato. So it all depends. Well, once you start your operation and you start networking with buyers, uh, just consider that if you're gonna ship it far away, you might need to harvest at a different stage where it's not fully mature yet. So that's something to keep in mind. Some individuals, most of the individuals that I have, they want a vine ripe tomato. But that's something to consider whenever you're harvesting. And these are some added value tomato markets. And that's just, once you start producing a product, a lot of times you say, well, what do I do with it? Where do I sell it? So these are just ideas. There's a bunch of farmer markets here in the valley. You can create a U-pick farm. You can have like an added value product because you're organic, if you're doing organic production. If you network with, a restaurant, there's different avenues to sell your product. Well, thank you for joining us today. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. And my email is should be here on the screen. And thank you for watching our video today.
All right. Thank you, Yvonne. So we're going a little bit late right now, so we're gonna try to keep it to about two or three questions right now. So if those that have asked questions in the Q&A function, we have answered a few. For example, people asked where to find the videos on the UTRGV SARA YouTube page. We've included the link in the actual question little box. So if you open that up and you go to the answered tab, it should have the link in there. There have been a couple questions about the YouTube page, and then one question about where people can get compost in the valley, and that was answered by Albert. He provided the number for the McAllen composting facility. So for some of the other questions, I want to get to the people that asked questions first. Like I said, right now we're going to have to keep it to about 2 questions just to make sure that we're maintaining. And we're going to do our best that everyone that submits questions here by the end of the session, we will have answered them either through this Q&A function by entering in answers, or we're going to incorporate some of our other experts here. So Juan and Cruz, if you guys want to unmute yourself, there's a couple questions here. First from Edna Flores. Edna wants to know about for tomato production, the sort of uses of the shade house for, I think that was for your seedlings, Yvonne, versus using a greenhouse or a hoop house. So Cruz, you grow lots of tomatoes in hoop houses. When would you use like a hoop house versus a shade house?
Okay, basically what it is not to make too expensive. You start off with a tunnel house or a greenhouse that has clear plastic. And you'll be using that during the cool part of when you have the cool weather, so forth, so on, not so hot, not so sunny. And basically the only other expense that you would make is buying a shade cloth and throwing it over your tunnel house. That way you won't have to purchase two types of growing facilities for your plants.
All right, thank you, Cruz. The next question we have that we're going to answer comes from Tanya Lee. Tanya is asking Yvonne, so for the plastic mulch that you were showing, are you applying that after you plant or before?
Okay, no, that plastic mulch where you see the tractor working that field, you apply it before you plant. You lay your drip tape on the bottom, and then or that same applicator is laying that drip tape on the bottom and then covering it with the plastic, and then you go in and punch your holes. Say you're planting your tomatoes at 18 inches or 24 inches, you'll be punching your holes right in the middle next to the drip tape, and then you'll be planting your tomatoes.
All right, thank you, Yvonne. Now we're going to go to a question from Hannah Marble, and is asking if you have your tomato seedlings covered with a plastic lid, is it still necessary to water twice a day?
Well, in my experience, I've always done them twice because you got to consider that the little cell where the seed is placed, it's really small, and the potting mix that you use has a lot of air pockets, so it doesn't hold water very well. It's designed to where you don't want to have for it to get muddy because of the diseases. So to answer her question, if you have them inside, maybe some people have those little growing trays with that plastic cover, and they have them inside. The environment may be different, but since I grow everything outside, in the elements, the wind, other than being in that little greenhouse, I tend to water twice.
All right, thanks, Yvonne. Now, in the interest of time conservation here, we are going to transition over to the watermelon session. We're going to try to keep this to an hour, but depending on how many questions we get, the Q&A section after the watermelon presentation might go past an hour. So we very much thank everyone for joining us. Stay as long as you can, the full hour, or if you need to go somewhere else. The video for this with all the answers will live in a video that is on our UTRGV SARA YouTube page. All you have to do is go to YouTube, and in the little search bar, you put in UTRGV SARA, SARA, and our videos should come up. You subscribe to us, and you should get all of those videos in your feed. As well, if you want to contact us via Facebook, there's UTRGV Texas Rural Cooperative Center, and there's UTRGV Beginning Farmer and Rancher Program. If you reach out to us, the right person will get in contact with you. Now, without any further ado, I'm going to move on over to our second presentation by Albert Ibarra, who is with the UTRGV Rural Texas Prosperity Project. Albert has been working with the university for over 20 years, and he has been growing commercially crops for more than 20 years as well. That includes watermelon, melon, cucumber, and corn, as well as various other commodity crops and specialty crops as well. So Albert, you wanna take us over?
Yes, thank you, Colin, for the introduction. I want to thank you guys out there tuning in to what we try and help. At the end of this presentation, if you have any questions, go ahead and keep our email address. And hopefully, if we don't have the right answer, we can try and get it to you. This is just a summary of what some of the topics we're going to be discussing. Have in mind, if there is something on there that is something that you would want to find out about, feel free to let us know how we could help you and assist you. First, we begin with the soil preparation. We try to tell a lot of people to go ahead and get their soil plowed under, chiseled. I personally, we used to run a plow, make sure to make that pan break, get the water. You really want to get the most moisture, especially in the watermelon fields. You really want to keep your water in your furrows, your rows. At this point, we would recommend that if you're going to put fertilizer, try and incorporate it since your beds aren't made at this point. If you can see the slide, you can see that the rows have been made. The plastic liner has already been set up. Windbreaks have already been planted. Windbreaks, you can use Sudan grass. People have used oats, wheat. It just depends on what you would want to put as a windbreaker. They help you a lot. They will help the wind not damaging the plants as much. We do have a couple of months that will be windy, and the watermelon plants take a toll on the beating of the air, the wind. There are a couple of varieties out there of watermelons. These are some I got with a local company. The numbers are there provided. These are some of the watermelon that they're the top sellers. What I try and recommend to people is not only me growing, there have in mind, we used to plant watermelons back in the day that were the bigger the better. But we were talking that you were going to be having it in your home, and you had a big old watermelon, and then sometimes you just don't know what to do with all of it. Now different varieties have come out that have been smaller, sweeter. There are personal watermelons that you can find out. Just contact, there's a lot of places on the internet that you can find different seeds, just depending on what variety you might want to be looking for. This is a place, there's an option that you can transplant, also seeding. A lot of people try and take advantage of the transplanting. These are some to your left that you can see, some that transplant here in the valley. There's probably others. These are some that we work with personally. As you can see, their greenhouse has already been established. They have watermelon growing. They have other varieties. So you just take them to seed, get with them, and they will tell you when they're already ready for transplanting. As you can see here, the plastic, the way Yvonne mentioned in the previous video, they make a hole in it. So this person is already transplanting their watermelon. You do have advantages of the plastic liner. One of them is having the advantage of the water control. You keep that water retained there on the bottom a lot better. Weed control is also an option that helps you. By the time the watermelon establishes itself, you have an advantage that the weeds are not there. This is a field that is from this year. As you can tell, the plastic liner is on there. The drip tape is also been right below it. And you can tell that it's working perfect. Less cultivation is required when the liner is installed right. Everything, the watermelon just expands nicely. This is that same field. They allowed that windbreak. They have them as walkways. The walkways you can use to go into your field to inspect it, spray it, anything you might need to do. As you can tell, the weeds, it's being controlled. Everything is working properly. This is a field on the top left-hand corner that they only installed drip tape, no liner. And you can see to the bright bottom that the grass, I mean, you can tell that the weeds are really coming up in between the watermelon plants. So you can tell that they're going to need to go in there and cultivate, but also have in mind, once the watermelon starts vining, depending what variety, there are some that vine up to 20 feet. So once they vine from row to row and you try and cultivate it, have in mind you will be taking some plants with you. This is a method that they use on the irrigation system. As you can tell on the top picture, there is a lay flat, that white line, which connects to your drip tape. And on the bottom right is the filtration system. It not only pumps the water into your field, into your drip tape, but you can also incorporate fertilizers at that point, something that your plant might need. Always there's places that you can find. Get your soil tested, make sure what your fields are requiring. And have in mind that these are raised beds. You don't have to have a 10, 20, 30 acre tract. You can do this in the backyard. You can see that the raised bed on the top has a little liner that they set up, it also helps with whiteflies. Whiteflies being an issue here in the valley. Anything else, you have pets. They don't go into your raised beds. On the bottom right, you can tell the irrigation that they put on it, and it helps. It retains the water. We help out people doing this. In between the raised beds, always remember, leave a proper spacing in case you need to walk around, inspect your raised beds also. Plant spacing is another thing. A lot of people forget. They just throw the seeds on the ground and they say, hey, I'm going to have watermelon in a couple of weeks, months. But one thing that they will vine, they will overtake. Have in mind that you need to properly space it. We personally would plant them every 3 feet, enough for them to grow, establish themselves. This is a group that we helped in Peñitas here in the valley. They had some open space that they weren't doing anything. If you could tell by the picture, they put some blocks, cinder blocks, and they did the proper spacing. They were irrigating it also with a drip tape. You can't tell, but they did pretty good on this little area. So if you're thinking you only have a spot, not that much of an area, this is perfect. This is, I mean, any little space, any corner that you can take advantage of. This is a high tunnel that we helped out a gentleman in Weslaco. He was trying to plant. Of course, you hear it all the time. When can we plant? When can we do this? Sun being a factor where we are, it will overtake. It will eat your crop up. Too hot, the heat. But of course, this, if you can see, it has that little mesh. It was going to help for the summer. He wanted to try something out. I try and encourage people to try and do it. You never know. You can try it a month later after they tell you. There's only one way that you're going to try it and see if you can succeed. Some of the pests that to look out for are to your left. Here in the valley, mostly it's the whitefly, especially during cotton season. Cotton season tends to end and the whiteflies need somewhere to go. And unfortunately, they go into the watermelon patches, melon patches, cucumber. But if you're taking care of it, contact some people. There's places that they have inspectors that'll go out there and check. You can also take a picture in case it has disease on it. As you see in this photograph here, you can, right now with what we are having, I spoke to some people and they're like, you know what, if you can't make it in, just text us your pictures and we will be able to contact you back or hopefully steer you in the right direction. These are some of the diseases that you're seeing to your left. Mostly is a downy mildew and the powdery mildew here in the valley, but you never know. For the harvest time, the field is already ready. Be looking out for watermelons. Make a note when you plant. It'll take about 70 to 80 days. But have in mind, not all of them will come at the same time. Some will ripen a lot sooner than the other. There are different ways to find out. I've had years of experience planting watermelons, and it's always the same deal. How can you tell if the watermelon is ripe off the vine? We have gentlemen that'll say the little stem as it reaches a watermelon, if it's drying out or dried, it's already ready to harvest. I've tried it myself. Sometimes it's a 80-20 shot. There's other people that'll say, hey, you know what? Just go and tap on them. You can hear that little knock. You can hear that the water is ready. When I mention water, make sure that you don't over water. We have so many situations that people will tend to over water their crops, and too much water will make your watermelon either crack in half or they won't have a taste. That sweet taste that you're wanting will just be basically like if it's water. I hope this presentation might have helped you. I know we're cutting it close, but if you have any questions, please feel free. Contact us via email or on Facebook. Hopefully we tried to help you and steer you in the right way, and give us a call.
All right, Albert, thank you so much. As everyone can see in this last slide, we have the email for both Avan, which is a.guerra@utrgv.edu, and Alberto Ibarra at utrgv.edu. We also have the Facebook pages for some of the projects that these gentlemen work on and that our other staff work on at the UTRGV Center for Sustainable Agriculture and Rural Advancement. So we're going to go through some of the questions that have been coming in through the Q&A. We have a few more. Some of them apply, I think, still back to the tomato presentation, some of them to the watermelon presentation. But while we have Albert here, Juan, Ivan, and Cruz, do you guys want to unmute yourselves so you can join this? But Albert, I'm gonna ask you a question first. So I was reading something online about harvesting the watermelon. Like you said, like when is the right time? And I read something. Someone attributed it to a quote from an old writer that when the watermelon isn't ripe and you slap it, it makes the sound. It goes pink, like the word pink, P-I-N-K, goes pink. But when it's ready, it makes the word punk, it goes punk. Is there any truth to that? Is that just like a crazy old wives' tale or whatever?
No, I don't know, Colin. Honestly, that's why I'm curious if somebody out there might have an answer, might say, hey, you know what, this is the way we do it. The way you mentioned, I've run across a lot of people that are harvesting, especially the older folk. I'm not that young myself, but I know that a lot of people would say that the lines that are on top of the watermelon, it has to be totally from one side to the other. Other one will turn the watermelon to see the belly of the watermelon.
That those are the greatest indicators, is that those lines have actually made the connections? Yes,
from point to point. I've seen people at the grocery store just be thumping away at the watermelons.
Right. Okay, so we have some other questions here that people have typed in, and I also see that one of the attendees has raised their hands. Depending on how long this goes, if we get through all the written questions, we're going to go to some of the attendees that have their raised hands, and we might actually be able to activate their microphones for them to interact with some of our specialists here. So we have a question from Isaac Suleimana. Is there a place available to rent or borrow the plastic mulch layers in the valley? Juan, do you know of any places that you can rent plastic mulch layers, or is it you're always purchasing it, right?
Yes, I don't know of any place here locally that will rent you a plastic mulch layer. It will have to be, knowing a farmer or someone that has one and borrow it. But for rent, not that I know of.
Okay. We have another question from Thomas Tibby. I think that's how you pronounce it. Again, on the plastic mulch and this is, I'm gonna put this to Cruz. How do you remove the plastic mulch, or do you leave it in and it breaks down in your soil? Does it depend on the type of plastic mulch that you actually get, Cruz?
Actually, if you buy the plastic, what they call plastic mulch, it does not break down. It's not biodegradable, but you can buy some that is biodegradable. It's a little bit more expensive.
Okay.
In removing it, it's kind of tedious, but I will say that as far as applying it, you can do it manually. It's labor intense. There is mulch layers out there that are economical, and then you have some real fancy ones. And when I say economical, I'm talking maybe about $1,000. But then you have some that'll lay the plastic, lay the T-tape, and do everything for you in one pass. And those are more in anywhere from the $4,000 to $5,000 range. But as far as the plastic being removed, you have to remove it manually. And there is a tool also that has discs that can do it if you have a small size tractor. Either way.
So it sort of really depends on what scale you're doing this too, in terms of how much money you're going to invest in it, right?
That is correct. All this stuff can be done manually. Like I said, it's labor intense if you're small scale. On another note, on the plastic, you can purchase the plastic in different widths. The lengths normally are basically maybe like 2,500 feet long for a roll. And they're más o menos around $120 to $150. And the woven fabric is a little bit more expensive. It also comes in different widths, and it comes in 300 foot rolls, and they normally run anywhere from $65 to $75.
All right, thank you, Cruz. We have a question from Marla Vasquez. I think this is going to be for Yvonne. Yvonne, Marla's asking the shade, the sort of the shade cloth that you had there for raising your tomato seedlings. Where can she get it down here in the valley? Like, where's the best place to get it, or do you get it online?
Well, Colin, what I've been getting the last couple of years at Lowe's, and they have different percents of I guess of as far as the shade quality. The more percentage it is, you know, the more sun that it will cut off. So Lowe's, Home Depot, they have it. Of course, you can find it online, but it's kind of tricky. It's, you know, when you go look for it, it's usually in the garden section, and it's usually like in a corner, and it'll be like a roll. So it's nothing that is there easy to find. But if you go where they have all the plants, you know, the garden area, there's a section there where they'll have that shade cloth. And the last one I purchased was last year at Lowe's.
Okay. Thanks, Yvonne. We have an early question, which I think was actually presented during the tomato presentation from Amber Killian. And Juan, if you're there, I'm gonna put this to you. Juan, Amber is asking, do you have any problems with cross-pollination?
Yep.
And again, this is for tomato production.
Yeah, I mean, first, I don't know, Yvonne, do you want to answer that one? If not, I can contribute with something.
Well, I don't have any issues. Typically, you know, I'll have plots that are, if I'm experimenting with, you know, a different variety, I'll set it apart. You know, typically in the front of my house, I've got like an acre, and in the back, I got like 4 acres. So I'll separate if I'm doing different varieties that I wanted to experiment, you know, for my own trial purpose. I won't plant them in what I'm in my plot that I'm using for production to sell. So I've never had an issue, but I do have, you know, the option to separate. But I've planted, you know, say the beefsteak and grape tomatoes and cherry tomatoes together, and I never had any problems.
All
Yeah,
right.
just I'm gonna add something really quick, Colin, on that. As far as cross-pollination, we have hybrid varieties, and those, if you look out for hybrids, those, whatever you see on the picture of that tomato that you purchase, that's what you're gonna get, and you're not gonna have problem with cross-pollination. But there is also open pollinated varieties, also known as heirloom tomatoes. And if you find or you buy those, then you're gonna see some cross-pollination, very likely if your plants are very close. So just for information, you know, if you wanna get a variety and keep the traits of that variety, purchase a hybrid. But if you're okay with having some cross-pollination and finding some natural cross-pollination varieties, you can purchase heirloom tomatoes.
All right, Juan, thanks. So a couple of the questions I wanted to, so on the shade cloth, Debbie Cox, very famous Valley resident in the gardening scene. Shout out to Debbie Cox. She's saying Kinney Bonded has a large amount of shade cloth for people that are looking to acquire it down here. And then also a few people, Edna Flores, Lina Romero, are also asking about high tunnels, about constructing high tunnels, the benefits, the costs. So this is our first training series. We're going to have another round of trainings, another training series, probably in the August to September range. And high tunnels will most likely be a really a topic that we drill down on, that we go deep on during that series. So not going to, because there's so much information there and there's so many sort of trade-offs that that could really sort of take us down a rabbit hole. So I'm going to say that presentation will be coming. And we have probably the regional experts on high tunnel construction and use here as part of our team. Cruz, Juan, Yvonne, and Albert have all done lots of work in high tunnels, and so that'll be coming shortly. Want to say okay, so Penny Britton, and I believe this is Albert for you for watermelon. She's asking, how often are you watering? Are you watering? Does it just depend on how much rainfall there is, or generally how much water do these things need?
1 to 2 inches a week. Make sure not to overwater the way I mentioned. Make sure that the soil is damp. But also, you'll notice if you're overwatering, it'll start showing on the leaf. And just make sure not plenty of water. Once you start seeing those watermelons like about as well, it depends what variety, but I try and tell them a little bit bigger than a football. Make sure to watch your water, because a lot of people have the mind that more water, the better. And of course, like I mentioned, you get a pretty good rain and they will just literally break on the vine there.
Right. So that goes to a question from a longtime friend of the program, Carlos Garcia, who's asking, does the watermelon crack because of too much water, too much heat, or both? Is it mostly the water?
It's water, but it can be both. We had fields in the San Manuel area that they are dry land. So the watermelon was working perfect. It was working perfect. And then all of a sudden, a pretty good rainstorm, 2-3 inches comes in. And then it's just like too much water for it. They will tend to crack.
Okay. And then I think the only question we haven't gotten to yet is if someone is using a raised bed, a sort of boxed raised bed, and I'm gonna put this to Juan. Someone is using a raised bed in a box and they have netting up so that say rabbits or ganado can't get in there or something like that. How are you generally advising people in terms of harvesting tomatoes, watermelon, whatnot? And then how are those people supposed to apply fertilizer at the bottom or near the soils? That's a bit of a sort of specific topic, but that question has been asked, and I imagine it's more relevant to tomato production.
Yes, actually, I was giving it a thought as I read it. I don't have it clear in my mind. Is it completely covered from the top or is just around? But on either way, for the fertilization, one way, let's say you have a lot of problems with, like you said, rabbits or birds or something, and you want to completely cover it. One way to apply the fertilizers could be through the drip irrigation. That like Cruz mentioned on his presentation last week, there is an injector you can use to feed all your plants. That would be a way to fertilize with a system like the one we're talking about right here. And as far as harvesting and things, I mean, of course, if it's enclosed, time to harvest comes, and you're gonna have to open it and harvest. There is not gonna be other way to harvest if it's enclosed. But one option, like I said, for fertilization can be the drip irrigation without having to get in the cage.
All right, Juan, thank you very much. So we have a couple attendees here that have raised their hands. We've got Edna Flores and Jackie Gutierrez, and we're gonna open the line here for Edna first and then Jackie to ask a question. Hopefully they're still around. We'll wait between 5 to 8 seconds to make sure that there's a connection, and if it's not, we'll move on to Jackie. So Edna, I'm going to allow you to talk. If you could, present your question, and then we'll figure out the right person to answer it. All right, Edna, are you there? You're going to have to push a button. There you go.
I'm here. Can you? Okay,
Yeah.
First of all, good morning, and thank you for all this helpful information. I really appreciate it. I've been enjoying the last few seminars, whatever you want to call them. So my question is, I'm really trying to grow for my family. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm a family of 6. I really want to grow for my family, and I'm small time gardener, a few little raised gardens, and I've tried tomatoes, and it's up and down tomatoes, cucumbers, bell peppers, okra, and it's really up and down. I can't say I have a really good crop, but the question is, I want to know what is maybe I would like some guidance on the best way to, I don't know, to grow what I'm trying to grow, because I have so many problems with your aphids, and I do spray the neem oil or the soap with dishwasher, and I really don't know the best method. So do I want to contain it? Which is why the reason I'm asking about tunnels or greenhouses, or I don't want to deal with the bugs, or which I know they're not, it's inevitable, or the rattlesnakes. I live in the San Manuel area. So we see a lot of those in the neighborhood. So.
All right. So Edna, I'm gonna ask Cruz. Cruz, if you heard that, it seems like Edna has some questions about containing some of the pests and some of the insects with her production and containing it. And also, it seems like she has some very specific problems. Would it be possible for us to follow up with her and maybe give her some sort of tailored advice?
Yes, no problems. She can become one of our clients. As a matter of fact, I believe we've worked with her before. But as far as keeping bugs and stuff like that, it's all that is inevitable. You're never ever going to eliminate that problem if you have a garden. You may be able to keep it up as far as your area is concerned, but you may have, as you were mentioning in San Manuel, you may have woods beside you where there's your bugs are coming in from, so you'll never ever get rid of them. Yes, you can. There are other options. You can use a shade cloth type of system tunnel house. You can use a plastic covered tunnel house. There are options to eliminate or help you contain some of those insects. I used to grow tomatoes on the outside. I've gone to 4 tunnel houses now, and even though it is increased and I have better production, I still do have problems with certain pests. It's something that, like I said, you're not going to get rid of, and you're not going to totally eliminate, but there are some easier ways of doing and growing some of your vegetables.
All right, Cruz, thank you very much. As people will probably be able to tell either on your phone or on your computer or on your TV, if you're more technologically advanced than we are, we have launched a poll. If people would do us the very kind service of just answering, I think there's about 4 or 5 questions. A couple of them are just on what your intentions are. Are you a backyard gardener? Are you going to use this information to grow for yourself, for your family, which we assume a large proportion are. What we know, I mean, part of our mission, part of our goal is really to help people that are looking to get into commercial production at any scale. People that are looking to sell at farmers markets for the first time, to possibly join community supported agriculture, those sort of boxes of food that are sold by farmers direct to consumers, that are possibly looking to sell to restaurants or to institutional customers. So we live in very interesting and troubling times right now, as everyone's aware. There's a lot of turmoil in some of these markets. And so really figuring out for those that are looking to sell for the first time, what is the most feasible avenue to do that? What are the best markets? We are very much here for that, but we want to know what type of information do the participants here want? And we're going to really try to tailor it to the audience here. If it's mostly for backyard gardeners, we're going to try to sort of keep it at that level. So if people can fill out the poll, and give us some feedback, we very much appreciate that. So the second person who raised their hands, I think that person left. If any other participants here, any attendees would like to ask a question like Edna did, please by all means raise your hand. Otherwise, we're going to close this out. Like I said, so this has been brought to you by the Beginning Farmer and Rancher program and the Rural Texas Prosperity Project. You're part of UTRGV, Center for Sustainable Agriculture and Rural Advancement. Our intention is, it looks like COVID will be with us for a while, and that will really put the onus on these types of remote trainings. We're used to doing face-to-face trainings, and we're transitioning some of that to remote trainings to make sure that people can stay safe, that our clients can stay safe, can get this information in the safety of their home, in their office, wherever. And also we are keeping our staff safe. But agriculture is one of the ways that people are trying to develop themselves during these times. They're trying to grow for their families. They're trying to figure out how to maybe bring some new income into their household because people have lost jobs. So there are challenges, and we're trying to help people address those challenges, but also help people take advantage of the opportunities that might be presented here. So that said, no one else has raised their hand, so I'd like to thank everyone for joining us here, and that's it for this series. Thanks to everyone who has attended, and look out on Facebook for the announcements for our next round of training, which I said they will probably come sometime in August or early September. So I'd like to thank all of our presenters, Cruz, Albert, Ivan, Juan Regosa, and I'd like to also thank our technical coordinator, Hector Solis, who has taken time off during his vacation to support us during these times. And thanks all of you, and we will hear from you again, or you will hear from us within the next couple months. Everyone stay safe, and onward and upward.